Thank you very much, Chairperson of the NCOP. Last week, under the protection of a phalanx of security, behind an impenetrable ring of steel and barbed wire thrown around this Parliament, watched over by a Praetorian Guard of over 441 military personnel armed with assault rifles, and in a precinct that pushed the people further away from this Parliament than they've ever been before, in an environment of heightened fear and intimidation of the opposition and the media by the jackboot state, and of course, under the watchful glare of a power-hungry speaker determined to protect her president instead of the People's Parliament. This president stood before the nation and described a land so far removed from the ordinary reality lived by South Africans on a daily basis, you were left wondering if it was at all possible for one man to be so detached from the lived experience of our people.
Honourable Steenhuisen, please take your seat. Honourable Waters.
Chairperson, I'm sorry to interrupt the Speaker, but it seems like Castle Corner has moved from that side to that side. All they do is howl. They're not listening to the speech, and I'm surprised you haven't called them to order.
Please take your seat. Honourable members.
Point of order, House NCOP Chair. Shall I go ahead?
No, sir. I am going to rule. Honourable members, you are allowed to heckle, but you are not allowed to drown the speaker on the podium. Diveni kakhle, you are allowed to heckle, but none of you is allowed to drown a speaker. Please proceed. Honourable.
Point of order, Chairperson of NCOP.
You are on a point of order?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
The point of order I want to raise is that respect for the House is important. There is no House chair, there is no castle corner in the House.
Thank you, sir. Honourable Waters, there is no castle corner in the House. Can we proceed? Honourable Steenhuisen.
It was truly bizarre to hear the President outlining plans that sounded like he was an opposition leader running against his own government than the leader of a party that's been in power for 22 years. How disappointing it must have been for the 9 million South Africans sitting at home without work, desperate for a glimmer of hope that things will get better. All they were served up was a dish of more high rhetoric, more empty promises, and yet another year of despair to add to the 8 previous years of the Zuma presidency. And that's why, when he droned on in that monotonous monotone, he put his own benches to sleep and he made his nation weep. His members slept because they know, just as the nation knows, that he will never ever deliver. The nation wept because they knew that these were just words on a page written by the Latuli House apparatchiks, going through the motions, just like jobs, 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 just like the 9-point plan, just like the NDP. Nothing will come of the speech. It was nothing more than a cynically crafted subterfuge as a bit to disguise the backstory of state capture, corruption, and failing parastatals. How disappointing it must have been for all those who placed their trust in you, Mr. President, to deliver them from their
Honourable
suffering.
Steenhuisen, honourable members, you are not heckling, you are screaming. Please continue.
Not only have you broken faith with the Constitution, you've broken faith with the people. It was also not surprising that the President had to bring his army with him to Parliament last week. He knew that he couldn't win the debate through force of argument. So instead he sought to win it with a show of force. This is what desperate dictators do when they run out of credibility. They hide from the people behind lines of troops with guns and armoured cars. Analysts watching the Sona have...
Order, Speaker. Order, Chair.
Honourable Steenhuisen, please take your seat.
Chair.
Yes, sir. Your point of order.
I'd like to ask Honourable Steenhuisen whether you can take a question.
Honorable Steenhuisen, would you take a question?
I only take questions from people who haven't been named the Mampara of the month by the Sunday.
He doesn't take.
All right, Speaker.
Please
Can I
take
raise-
your seat.
can I raise a
He is
point of
not
order,
willing
Chair?
to take a
Can I
question.
raise another point of order, Chair?
Honorable,
Can I raise a point of order, Chair?
no. You stood and asked whether the member wanted to take a question.
I
He
agree,
says
Chair.
no.
And he insulted me at the same time.
Honorable Bongo, take your seat. Honorable Steenhuisen, continue.
Analysts watching the Sona of last week have been debating for days while the president giggled like a schoolgirl while the violent scenes unfolded here in the House. Some have said it was a nervous response, but those of us who witnessed it at close quarters could see that it was anything but. The president was clearly relishing the brutal beating and the awful sounds of flesh on bone, breaking benches, and the wails of terrified women in pain. Only a true tyrant would derive enjoyment watching those opponents elected to exercise oversight over him being dealt with like this. But as disappointed as those citizens last week must have been with the president's speech, pales into insignificant with the disappointment they must have felt by the poor grade of speakers fielded by this uncaring, unresponsive, arrogant and inward-looking lot here today. We had Minister Jeff Radebe up here, and he spoke about the mayhem, but of course conveniently forgets the fact that Minister Zulu tore up 2 of the flags in memory of the Esendameni 94, that we were told to F off and call dogs in this house by members of the ANC, including premiers, and then you complain that the EFF disrupts the president's spurious points of order when all you've done today is deploy that exact tactic in this house against DA speakers. Hypocrisy indeed. You're wrong about JSE ownership. The PRC has 1.8 trillion rand of investments on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, all pensions money of civil servants, and according to the DPSA, the civil service is 91% black South Africans. Go back to the drawing board. I also noticed from the weekend papers that you appear to have entered the race for the presidency of your party. You've got a bit of catching up to do because 1 or 2 of the candidates are a little bit ahead of you in terms of their literature. I'm still trying to work out what the BM stands for. Could it be bad mood? Mr. Mkongi came to the podium here and spoke about the Botha and Milan regime without recognizing the absolute irony that he has become the Botha Milan regime right here in Parliament, hiding behind tanks and the army and the police to beat your political opponents when you can't beat them with argument. I also would be pulling out O.R. Tambo from the archives as this is what was sitting in the presidency of my party today. Too embarrassed to talk about your current leaders, so you've got to go back and resurrect them from the past. But I can tell you one thing, if O.R. Tambo was around today, he would be disgusted with what's happened to his party, and he would be disgusted with what's happened to you. Inciting people to burn down buildings on Facebook, burn other people. You're so desperate to be made the Deputy Minister of Trade and Industry. Mr. President, can't you just appoint the man so we don't have to be suffering these tirades every year? Then we had the Honourable Premier of the Northern Cape, Mrs. Lucas, up here. She comes here and tells us about delivery in our greater provinces doing. 43.3% unemployment, the highest in the country. The incidence of poverty, 42% in the Northern Cape, 2.7% in DA-run Western Cape. The truth of the matter is that, like KFC in the Northern Cape, her government doesn't deliver. The only delivery that's happening in her province is that being done by Mr. Delivery. 53,000 rands worth of government money spent on KFC, Nando's and fast food. Not breaking any records in her province, but I hear that the Horseshoe Motel got pretty broken up this weekend with your factional fight with Mr. Mzamani Saw. Eh? I would suggest that you go back to your province and sort it out rather than coming here and swanning around in your fancy outfits. Minister Mkwinti came here, and after the weekend papers, I can't imagine how you could possibly show your face here today. And I agree with you, I think we should do a land audit. I think he's absolutely right. We should start with a land audit at Letuli House. Let's see how many government farms have been handed over to the comrades and friends. Mr. Nkwinti also talks about the land. He owns three properties, 2 farms and a house in Kenton, hardly in the ranks of the landless. Rather large farm as well. But I noticed he brought a whole lot of people to the gallery. Mr. Errol Present wasn't present. I wonder why. Obviously a bit embarrassed to bring him here. But he also wasn't completely honest in terms of the Cape Town land deal. Yes, the city had to spend 5 million rand of ratepayers' money.
Honourable House Chair.
Please take your seat, sir. Honourable Majeke, you are on a point of order.
Is Honourable Steenhuisen ready to take a question on how much of land
No, ma'am.
is owned by the members of
No,
the
ma'am.
DA sitting here?
Honourable Steenhuisen, are you ready to take a question?
I'll take one in Barney's afterwards. I know she'll be there.
He's not ready, ma'am. Please continue, sir.
But the truth is that in South Africa we can have an inclusive and fair economy that is growing and creating jobs. In South Africa we can have water, electricity, homes, and most importantly, dignity for our people. South Africa can have excellent schools that feed into a tertiary and skills development system that creates real opportunity for our people. We can have this, and we can have so much more. But it's going to be up to the citizens at home that are watching this debacle here today and over the last few days, because they're going to have to be the change that forces the spring of change in South Africa. This ANC has failed you. This Parliament has failed you. And what you need is a party that gets up every day and is obsessed about fighting your corner. The DA under Musi Maimane is that party. So help us vote this moribund lot out of office so that you can have a government that is truly on your side. A government that fights for growth, not Guptas. That brings jobs and not jets. That brings dignity and not despair. You've given us the keys to the metros in the country. It's time to give us the keys to the union buildings in 2019. That fight starts now.
Thank you. The Honourable Zikalala.